Hello everyone and welcome once again. I am WeAreNim, and this tutorial we are going to focus on importing materials and setting up shaders for our Unreal Tournament level interface and also for our environment. First thing we need to do is we need to talk about the MyLevel folder structure for your package. And what I mean by package is in Unreal Tournament, whenever you save a level, for instance, our level, dm-tutorial_level, this is actually a package that refers to all the assets that are saved in this level that are not referenced anywhere else. So what I mean by that is whenever you import a material or a static mesh or a sound or music or any other asset, it's going to go into a folder called MyLevel, which is a virtual package that is tied to your level. And when you save and compile your level, any package that you can find that is tied to this name is going to refer to the MyLevel folder. I know that's a little bit confusing. If we get into this, it'll become a lot more clear. So let's start by importing some screenshots for our level. Now I've already got these 3 screenshots prepared. These aren't actually screenshots of the level we've made. These are just images that say screenshot 1, 2, and 3. But let's go ahead and start by clicking on screenshot 1 and click open. And you can see right now that the package that it wants to save to is the humanoid architecture package. And we do not want this. And there's a very important reason why we don't want this. Whenever Unreal Tournament starts and it connects to a server or is hosting a game and other clients try to connect to that game, one of the things that Unreal does is it checks the validity of the packages in use for that level. And if there are inconsistencies between the checksums of those packages, then Unreal thinks that there's an error. Either there's cheating going on or a package is corrupt, some other issue is happening, and therefore the level won't play for anybody else connected to it. So to ensure that that doesn't happen when you're uploading new assets and not saving them to some other package and potentially corrupting it, you're going to save it to the MyLevel package. Oops. And that's capitalized M, capitalized L, MyLevel. And for group, because these are screenshots and we don't necessarily care what group they go into, because they're not going to be picked as textures unless you want. You can put them in a group and then they can be selectable in this drop down list. These are groups. Then you can specify whatever group you want them to go in. Let's say screenshots. And then the name, we can just leave this as is. And then there are these options down here. Now, these are screenshots that are going to be used in the Unreal Tournament level selection interface. So they don't need mipmaps. And if you don't know what a mipmap is, imagine that you have a texture that is 512 units square, and it's applied to a surface. And that surface is several thousand units away, so that on camera that 512 by 512 surface on screen looks like it's about it's actually 64 units square because you're so far away. What happens is, because that texture doesn't have any mipmaps, the renderer is going to have a really hard time trying to pick which pixels inside that 512 by 512 image to render at full size at that distance inside of a 64 square view. And so it's going to cause a lot of shimmering, a lot of sparkling, a lot of noise. And what a mipmap does is it creates smaller versions of the texture in a tile set that the renderer can then refer to and swap out for the larger version when the texture is further away to reduce or eliminate that sparkle effect. So because this is going to be in the interface and we're not going to be moving further or closer away from it or to it, we don't need to generate mipmaps for this. And also because these screenshots are opaque and they don't have any transparency They don't have any opacity at all. We can leave the masked and alpha boxes blank as well. And we're just going to double check that we are in fact going to save this to MyLevel, which is referring to your level, and that it's going into the screenshots group and that the name is okay. And then we're going to hit OK. And now you can see we have a MyLevel package in the textures folder that has our texture in it. Now we're not quite done just yet. There's a couple of things that we can do to optimize this further and make it look better when it is being viewed in the Unreal Tournament interface. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to right click and we're going to go to Properties. And this is going to bring up the Texture Properties window. We're going to change the quality for high color quality to true. And we're going to change high texture quality to true. And next we're going to go into the texture properties and we're going to change the LOD set. We're going to change this from world to interface. And that means it's not going to generate LODs of this texture because we're not going to be seeing it at like close or far distances. And I know that we already said that we weren't going to generate bitmaps for it, but this just sort of helps reinforce that. And then we're going to close this and we're going to right click again and we're going to go down to compress and we're going to compress it to a DXT5. And DXT5 or DXT, for example, is an acronym for DirectX Texture. And it's just a slightly more efficient version of the texture that the engine can utilize. And now that we've done that, we're going to want to do it to our other screenshots. So let's go to Import. And we're going to select both Screenshot 2 and Screenshot 3. And we're going to click Open. And this is going to go into the Screenshots folder. We're not going to generate bitmaps. We're not going to generate alpha or masked. And we're going to hit OK to all. And we're basically going to go through the same steps that we did with the first texture. We're going to go to Quality, set these to True, and we're going to go to Texture, set the LOD set to Interface, and then compress to DXT5. Properties, Quality, sorry about that double click, and then Texture, Interface, then compress, DXT5. So we've got all three of our screenshots. Now what we need to do is we need to set up a material that's going to cycle between all three of these screenshots and do a transition between each one so that one will fade into two, two will fade into three, and 3 will fade back into 1. And so we're going to do that by creating a material sequence. So to do that, while we are in our MyLevel folder, we're going to click on New. And since we're in the Screenshots folder, or in the Screenshots group, it's going to keep that name there. And we're going to refer to this as Screenshots. Capitalize that S for consistency. And it's going to be a raw material. And we're going to change the material class to material sequence. And then we're going to hit New. So now you can see we have this blank material sequence here. And to start adding these screenshots, we need to expand the sequence items by clicking Add. So inside this sequence item, we're going to specify our first screenshot as the texture or the material. We'll click Use. And you'll notice that we're not actually seeing our material displayed here, and it's because the time is currently set to 0. So if we want this to be just like the screenshots that we see in the Unreal Tournament interface, we need to set this to a time of 1.5. This will be 1.5 seconds that this image will remain visible. And right now it doesn't look like it's changing or doing anything because it is currently looping 1.5 seconds on this same image, and we need it to transition to something else. So to get something else, we need to add another item in the sequence items list. And we're going to select our second screenshot. And we're going to use that in the material slot. Now, you can see it's still not changing because we haven't set a time for this. So we're going to set this to 1 second. And now you should see this number changing from 1 to 2. But it's not a smooth transition. So to make that happen, we actually need to change the action for this sequence item. So we're going to change it from show material to fade to material. And now what this will do is over 1 second of time, it's going to fade to the second material. And you can see that too, starting to fade in over the one. And this is the transition that we want. Now you note that it's not staying on 2 once we get there because it's looping as soon as that transition is done. So we actually need to add another sequence in here with the same texture to freeze on for another 1.5 seconds so that we can see it displayed before switching to the next material. And now you can see that 2 hangs around for a bit longer. And we're going to do the same thing for our third screenshot. We're going to add 2 sequence items. The third is going to be screenshot 3. We're going to use that. We're going to set the time to 1 second. And we're going to set the material action to fade. And then for our fourth, we're going to use the same texture. And we're going to set this to 1.5 seconds. And now to fade back around to our first level screenshot again, we're going to click on our first level screenshot. We're going to add a final sequence item, and then we're going to use that screenshot here, and we're going to change this to fade to material and set the time for 1 second. And now our material should be complete. We can also set a fallback, which I would just use the same texture again. And this is just in the event that for some reason there's a problem with this material and it doesn't go through the sequence as planned. All these settings should be completely fine. We want it to loop. We don't want it to be paused. The surface type doesn't matter because it's going to be in the interface. We should be good to go. So we're going to see this change from 1 to 2, from 2 to 3, and from 3 back to 1, all with smooth transitions. So now that we have that working, the way we need this to show up in the level selection inside the game is we need to actually put it in the level info properties. So to do that, we're going to go into level properties by clicking View, Level Properties, or you can just press F6, and we're going to go into Level Summary. And Level Summary, we have a field for screenshot. We can select the material sequence, and we can use it here. And then also we can type in a little description for our level. Say, this is my test level for shenanigans. I think I spelled that right. And we will go ahead and close this, and we will save. And now that we have this saved, we can close the editor. We can go into the game, and we'll just go to the instant action, deathmatch, and now you can see for my tutorial level, we have our screenshots here, and they are transitioning smoothly from one to the next. And you can see our description here. This is my test level for shenanigans. So that's all working as intended, and it looks great. So let's go back to our editor and start importing another material that we can use in our level. So I think what we're going to do is we are going to create a water material. Excuse me. Maybe I'll edit that out later. We're going to create a water material, and we're going to put it in the MyLevel package, which should now be loaded because we've loaded our level. And in the MyLevel package, you can see our screenshots and our material sequence is still here. But what I think we're going to do is we're going to make a little pool of water here in the middle of the room. Nice little wading pool, just for fun. So I'm going to move this aside for a bit, and I'm going to start building out the pool. I'll just do this really quick. You can follow along, pause if you need to, but I've essentially just selected the vertex editing tool, and I am now setting up real-time previews in all of my windows so that I can see what I'm doing. And I'm just going to drag these vertices around until they're in the shape that I want for the pool. I'm going to drag this out a bit as well, so it's a nice big kind of square pool. That looks great. I also want to make sure that there's a texture for this pool, so I'm going to go back to our humanoid architecture. I'm going to select our concrete, and then I'm going to go ahead and subtract. And you can see our lighting information has once again been broken because the surface normals have changed. But also, I'm going to select, actually I'm going to select my camera and just drag this off for a second so that we can see the borders of these textures. If I just select the textured option here in the perspective window, I can inspect the textures a lot more easily, and I can see that these textures are not aligned. And in fact, if I highlight both of these surfaces and I right-click Surface Properties, here's where I'll have a bunch of options that I can change for the alignment and the scale and the light map density and some other special properties for this material, or for this surface rather. If I start scrolling the texture, you can see that they're moving in two different directions and they're not aligned at all. So to fix this, we can click on the Alignment tab, and because it's a flat surface, we can just go to Planner, and we can leave this at Auto, and we can just hit the Align button. And that's going to realign both surfaces so that when we go to pan and start scrolling our texture across, it's going to be uniform across both of these surfaces. So now that we've fixed that, I also want to fix these sides of the pool, and I want them to use the floor texture, and I want to get these divides in between the tiles to match up with the floor tiles. So again, I'm going to go to the surface properties, and I'm going to go to alignment, and I'm going to hit align, and it's just going to align those to the grid. So now they all look like they are matching the floor tiles. And then for the bottom of the pool, I'm going to use a different floor texture, and because we've just reloaded the editor, I'm going to need to reload all the contents of this folder. And in the floors folder, I'm going to select this tile here, so we have something a little bit more unique that's going to show up underneath the water. I'm just going to be a little bit fidgety here and nudge the rotation, or the orientation just a little bit, so that these tiles are a little bit more centered. There we go. I think that looks fabulous. Okay. So we've got our pool carved out. The next thing we need to do is we need to fill it with some water. So I'm going to move this to the side real quick. I'm going to bring our preview brush back over to our pool. And I'm going to change the grid size to be something a little bit smaller, and go back to our vertex editing tool and drag the top of this volume here so that it's not coplanar with the floor. I want it to be just below the floor so that, the water doesn't look like it could just spill out and go everywhere. So this is going to be our water volume. And the way we turn this volume of space into water is we're going to go to the volume button and we're going to right click and we're going to select water volume. And once we've done that, we're going to go back up here. I'm going to switch to my camera so I can move the preview brush out of the way. And we now have our water volume here. There's a few properties we can set in this, including volume fog. We can set that to true. We can set our distance fog n to 2000, but we want this to actually be much closer. So if we set it to like 200 and the distance fog start to 8, that should be good. And now it's only going to apply those settings once we're actually underwater. And we'll be able to do that when we compile all of this and preview it. So let's do that now. I'm just going to build all. And I'm not seeing the lights in here because I need to switch over to the dynamic light view. And now I'm going to play. And we can move our camera around, and you can see now that we're in the water volume, it is generating fog. And as soon as I'm out of the water volume, it goes away. So we know that the water volume is there. And if we click to play, we can actually shoot the water volume and we can see splashes. So we know that the water volume exists. We just can't see the extents or the boundary of where that surface of the water is, unless we're like really close at approximating it by looking at the ripples and seeing where they match up against the wall to say, okay, the water's about that high. But we can jump into it and we can splash around. So we know the water is working. So now we're just going to have to make a material that allows us to see the surface of the water. And so to do that, we're going to import some water materials. Let's go back to the MyLevel folder. And we're going to click on Import. And for our tutorial series, I've already got a couple of water textures already made. Some things to note. These are 32-bit TGA files. Now what that means is every TGA file, if it is set to an RGBA color set, then it is going to be 8 bits per color channel. That's 8 bits for red, 8 bits for green, 8 bits for blue, and 8 bits for the alpha channel. So that those 8 times 4, it equals 32 bits. And that's only an important distinction to know when you are actually importing the image, to know that it has an alpha channel based on the number of bits. So we're going to highlight both of these. We're going to click Open. Now we don't want to put these in the screenshots folder. We want them in a water folder. And we do want to generate bitmaps because these are going to be in the game. And if we move far away, we don't want them to have that weird shimmery, sparkly, debuggy effect. And we also want to utilize the alpha and the mask in these textures to utilize that alpha channel. So we're going to select those. Masked isn't nearly as important as making sure that alpha is checked. If you do just masked and not alpha, it's going to reduce the alpha to a 1-bit layer. And that means it will either be fully white or fully black. And it's going to just choose whatever value in between is nearest to either of those extremes. So we're just, actually, we'll just leave alpha checked. And we're going to generate bitmaps. And we're going to hit OK to all. And you can see we now have two textures in our water group inside our MyLevel package. So I'm going to do something similar to what we did with our screenshots. We're going to go into Properties. We're going to go into Material, and we're going to check the surface type, and we're going to say Water. For quality, we'll go ahead and upgrade these to True, both of them. For surface, we are going to say that it is masked. Actually, no, we're going to leave that off. We're going to just leave it as an alpha texture. And we're also going to make sure that the texture is two-sided. And then for the texture itself, we are going to leave pretty much everything here as is because it's going to be part of the world. And you can see that the transparency works by clicking on this little checkerboard. You can see that the test pattern underneath is showing through where the alpha channel has set the opacity for the water ripples. Now, if you want to see this on a 3D object, you have to disable the alpha because it'll just apply that automatically, but you can see it on a cube and you can drag that around by either clicking left mouse or right mouse to preview it. You can also see it on a sphere. And just as a flat surface. So those are the properties that we're going to set for the ripple. We're also going to set some properties for our mask. And this is the texture that's going to allow us to set the water's opacity, which we'll do a little bit later when we assemble the full shader. So material, this will also be water. Not necessary to set, but I'd like doing it anyway. Quality, not necessary because there's not really a lot of detail in this. It's just a solid color for both the RGB and the alpha, so we can leave this all false. And for texture, we're going to change this all as well. Surface, we want this to be two-sided. And now that that's all set, we're going to compress these to DXT5s. So that they're a little bit more efficient. And now we're going to start assembling our water material. So first things first, we want to get this ripple animated. And the way we're going to do that is we're basically going to crossfade this material in two different directions, panning back and forth. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to create a new shader or material, and we're going to make it a text panner. So the text panner is basically going to take the texture and it's going to scroll it along at a certain speed, and we're going to call this tutorial water panner 01. Remember, no spaces in any of your names. We'll click on New. And now it's going to want a texture to refer to that it can pan. So we're going to select our water texture and click Use. And now you can see that it is slowly panning this texture across, and it's doing it at a rate of about 10%. That's how you can sort of read this. Doing it 10% per second. So the rate is done in seconds, and I'll show you if we set this to like 1.0, this would be like 100%. It's going to pan 100% of the texture in 1 second. So if we want to set this to something slower, like 0.05, it is now going to take 20 seconds for one side of the texture to pan all the way across to the other. And that's fine. We're still going to leave it at around the default at 0.1. The next thing we're going to want to do is change the direction. And because it's a flat surface, the yaw is what we're going to use to change the direction. And also, unfortunately, this doesn't work in degrees. So I wouldn't be able to just type 90 degrees to make it rotate upward. Instead, it's going to go at a slight angle. And that's because degrees are actually broken down into bytes. So if you wanted to get a full 190 degree angle, you'd have to input a value of 16,384. And that is going to give you a vertically scrolling texture. Now, we don't necessarily want a cardinal direction like this for our water. We want it to seem natural and random, so we're just going to put a random value in here. I'm going to say 5,397. And that's going to give us sort of a, angle that's kind of adjacent to around 35, maybe 40 degrees, somewhere in there. But it's random. So we're going to keep that. And now we're going to click on this exclamation point so we can see a real-time preview of our material in action. So this is really handy for previewing. And I'm going to right-click on the material, and then I'm going to select duplicate and make sure that we are still saving it to MyLevel, that the group name is still water, and we're going to change the name to tutorial water panner _02. So now we have a duplicate that we can just easily change by going into properties, and we can change the direction by simply reversing the pan rate by putting a negative in front of it. And now that goes in reverse. We also don't want the exact opposite direction for the panning direction. So we want to change this to another random value. Let's say 9,153. And we'll just leave it at that. So now we have two textures that are scrolling. We're going to need to combine both of these. And to do that, we're going to need a combiner. So let's go once again into our new material editor, and we're going to choose combiner. And we'll just call this tutorial water combiner. And click on new. So now we can select our first panner. We can put that into material slot 1. And our second panner we can put into material slot 2. And now that we have both of these here, we can't actually see them blending, and that's because we need to change the combine operation. So instead of use color from material 1, we are going to alpha blend with mask. And this is effectively using the alpha channel in both of these materials to blend together. And we're just going to leave that as is for now. I'm going to hit close, and you can see right now this is starting to look like water ripples a bit, but it doesn't have the transparency. So to do that, we are going to need to create our final shader. We're going to go to new, and we're just going to leave this as class engine shader, and we're just going to call this tutorial water. And click on new. So here in our material, we're going to select our combiner as our diffuse. Now you can think of diffuse as the color information. So all of the color in this texture, or rather this texture being applied here, this is what we're going to see for just the solid representation of it. So we're going to click use, and we can see it here. And now for the opacity, we're going to want to select our water mask. And this is going to allow the texture to be transparent. And now you can see the gray background. If I check the checker box here, you can see the ripples over the surface of the test background. And this starts to look a lot more like water. And that's really all we need to do. If we wanted to make this a little bit more complicated, we could add the combiner as the specular as well. And then for the mask, we would just use this water mask. I'm not going to. For self-illumination, we can also use the combiner. And the self-illumination mask, we can also use the mask. Now you want to be careful with some of these. If you put in the wrong type of material or texture that doesn't have the correct information for this particular type of shader filter, you could effectively break the game. Like you can literally crash the editor, and all the work that you've put in right now that you haven't saved will be gone, and you'll have to start over. So please be careful. There's also a chance that you could effectively cook your video card if you manage to put in some sort of infinite recurring loop where one shader is referencing another shader that is referencing itself. So be very careful with that. Don't do it. Last thing we're going to do is we're going to change the surface type to water. And the fallback material, we're just going to set to the combiner. And two-sided, we're going to set to true. And that should finish off our water material. So now we need to get this water material displayed. And we don't necessarily want to put this on a cube. The reason being that if we fill this space with another cube and it's a two-sided texture, we're going to see that two-sided texture z-fighting with the concrete here as we look through it because it's transparent, and it's going to be z-fighting with the bottom of the pool. Really, we just want to see the top surface of the water. So to do that, we're going to use the plane or the sheet brush preview. Now we're going to need to drag this back over. Oops, I selected my water volume. Did not mean to do that. Also, let's turn real-time previews back on. Move this out of the way real quick. Let's deselect that. Let's select our preview brush and bring that over. I'm just going to center it here. Actually, no, let's just make life really easy. I'm just going to put it here in the corner. And I'm going to use the vertex editor to drag out the dimensions of the pool. And then in the front view, I'll switch back to my camera. I'm going to pull this down so that it's at the surface of the water. And once I've done that, I'm going to want to add a BSP to this, but I don't want to add just any BSP because I want this water to not have collision. I want the volume underneath to handle all of that. So to do that, we're going to need to make a non-solid brush. And to do that, we're going to have to click on the Add Special Brush. So when we click on this, we're going to use the prefabs and select Non-Solid Brush. And then we're going to hit OK. Oh, before you do, let's make sure that we have our shader selected. And now we'll hit OK. And you can see we now have water, or at least the surface of water, in our little pool. Let's go ahead and hit close. And I'm going to go ahead and recompile. Now, you might be wondering what's happening here, why the water suddenly got so dark. Well, that's because this is a BSP, and the BSP is going to generate light maps and shadows. So what you're actually seeing is the shadow of the water, irregardless of the alpha channel, being baked underneath the water surface. And there's no real easy way around this. There's no way to set a BSP to not cast shadow. So if we want the light to shine through and we want this water to appear really clear, we're going to need to convert this BSP sheet into a static mesh that we can then toggle shadow casting on and off. So to do that, we're going to move our preview brush out of the way so we can see our current brush. And it's highlighted in green. I'll move this out of the way. And while it's highlighted, I'm actually going to do this first because it's easier to just show you the results after. But I'm going to rotate this brush around in the side view so that it is upside down. And then I'm going to drag it into the scene so that it is up here. And this little red square or little red cross is important because that's signifying where the origin point is for this brush when it gets converted into a static mesh. I'm going to build my geometry. So I've built this plane upside down, and then I'm going to right click on it, go to convert, and hit static mesh. Now, when I do that, you're going to get new static mesh. You're going to set the package to MyLevel. Because it's the water, we're just going to go ahead and put it in the water group. And the name, we're just going to call this water underscore sheet. And hit OK. Now, in your static meshes, you should be able to see your MyLevel, and you should see your water sheet in here. And if we hit the real-time preview, we can see that it's animating, which is great. That's exactly what we want. So we can get rid of this BSP mesh that we have. We'll just delete that and rebuild, and it's gone. And now, while this is selected, we can right-click in our scene, and we can add static mesh, MyLevel water underscore sheet. And you can see it here in the top view. Let's go ahead and drag it into place. In our side view, let's get it aligned with the surface of our water. And now we're going to right-click on this, and we're going to go into the static mesh actor properties. And we want to disable all of the collision on this. So we're going to get rid of the exact projectile collision. We're going to get rid of, we're going to get rid of all these actions that block actors, block karma, which is the physics system. Zero extent traces have to do with the camera, with like lens flares and things like that, and just actors in general. And then we're going to set the surface type to water just because we're redundant. And then for display, there's a couple of things that we can change. First, we're going to change static lighting. We're going to change shadow cast. We're going to change shadow cast to false. And with these options still open, we'll go ahead and do a full compile. And you can see now that the texture is not casting a shadow, and the light is going all the way to the bottom of the pool. So we are no longer dealing with exceptionally dark water. It looks shallow, as it should. It's slightly tinted blue, thanks to the alpha mask. So this water looks good. So we're going to close those properties. We're going to save our level because, and this is really important, if you're not using an asset in your level, even though you have added it to your MyLevel package, if it's not in use here, the game will not keep it in the package. So you have to make sure that that asset that you have created and that you've imported is being referenced somewhere in your map by something. The reason why we still have our MyLevel screenshots is because this material sequence is being referred to in our level properties inside the level summary. And because of this reference, the material that references these textures are all still here after closing the editor. So it's really important to note that if you are incorporating something into your level and you save that package, but you haven't actually placed it into level or don't have it being referenced by anything in your level, that thing that you've imported into the MyLevel virtual folder will disappear. So just keep that in mind in case you put an asset in your MyLevel and you don't put it in your level, and the next time you open up your package, it's not there. That is why. But we've saved everything. By the way, do not click this save button here. Just always refer to this, because this is going to cover everything, and you can potentially get into trouble just saving packages. Let's move this aside. So we've got our water surface. We've still got all of our spawns. And we've done a full compile. We can check our paths and make sure that everything still works. You can see that the nav point that was over the pool has now sunk down into the pool. And so this is a space that that bots will still navigate into without us having to do anything. Because by default, when you compile paths, it's going to try and move that path node down a certain distance until it can find the floor. If it's way too up high in the air and it can't detect a floor underneath it after a certain distance, it's going to give you an error. So just keep that in mind. Now that we've finished compiling everything, we've checked our paths, everything has been saved, we're going to close this. We're going to go into Unreal Tournament, and we're going to load up our map, and we're going to spectate some bots playing around in our space. Let's go to Instant Action, Deathmatch. Make sure tutorial level is highlighted. Let's get some masterful bots in here. Let's add 3 of them, and let's spectate. There they go. Now this is looking like a proper game. All right, so that's it for this lesson. Next lesson, we'll start expanding on the space a little bit more, and we'll talk a little bit more in depth about lighting. And also, we'll talk about movers briefly. Or maybe that we'll save that for another tutorial entirely. In either case, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.